What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Gameweek 29 deadline. I'm going to go through the latest press conference information, answer some of your questions, take a look at my updated free hit draft, and then talk about my own team as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's get into it. So we heard from Arne Slot today ahead of the Carabao Cup final. Konate is expected to train today, so presumably he'll be in the 11 against Newcastle, and as long as he comes through the international break with no issues, he'll be available from Gameweek 30 onwards if you want to carry him through the blank in 29. With Trent Alexander-Arnold, Slot confirmed he's out of Sunday's final. He went on to say still being assessed, but we do expect him back before the end of the season. That doesn't give me massive amounts of confidence that he's going to be back for Game Week 30. I think we should probably be expecting him to miss kind of Game Weeks 30, 31 at minimum, probably even longer. So if you're looking at your team thinking, I could sell this player, I could sell Trent, I would just go ahead and sell Trent. I don't think he's going to be on people's wildcards teams in 30 or 31. There's no guarantee he'll even be back for then, so it's okay to get rid of him. So for Bournemouth, Iraola said there's no new injuries. The players that were available last week will be available this week. So for anyone that was worried about Semenyo picking up a knock in the last game, that doesn't seem to be the case. He's also been spotted in training as well. So if you've got him, he's fine to play this week. And if you're thinking about buying him, that also looks pretty good as well. He always starts. The minutes are good too. The unfortunate thing, well, fortunate for Bournemouth, unfortunate for Ouattara owners, if everyone's fit and available that was available last week, presumably Ouattara is going to be on the bench again. Evan-Nielsen number 9, Kluivert behind him, and then the wide players probably Semenyo and Tavernier. Could Ouattara come in instead of Evan-Nielsen or one of the wider players? Yes, but I wouldn't put much money on it. I don't think it's likely to happen. So if you've got him, I'll be thinking about potentially getting rid. And there's a question later on about taking a hit for him. But my prediction will be he doesn't start against Brentford, and there's no guarantee he starts against Ipswich either. So I'm going to go through my predictions for Game Week 29. Don't forget that you can join the Let's Talk FPL League over on Slipper and make your predictions as well, completely free. And whoever gets the most predictions correct will win a £50 Amazon voucher. All you have to do is click the link in the description below or scan that QR code on screen. So first up, we've got David Moyes managing his former team up against West Ham, also his former team. I'm going to go for an Everton home win. I think Everton have been strong under David Moyes. Forest away win against Ipswich, but I wouldn't be surprised if that game is closer than most people are giving it credit for. Man City to beat Brighton at home. Southampton Wolves is a tricky one to call. Usually I back against Southampton. I think Southampton could get a goal or two against Wolves, so I'm going to go for a draw there. Bournemouth I think will beat Brentford. Brentford attack very good, Visser and Mbeumo in particular, but Bournemouth attack is as strong, if not slightly better, plus they're at home and their defence is better as well. I think Arsenal to beat Chelsea. Fulham Spurs last year, bad memories. Game Week 29 last year, I free hit 3 Spurs players. They lost 3-0 to Fulham. Fulham have been strong. Spurs just played in Europa League, albeit didn't have to go to extra time at least. I'm going to go for a Fulham home win. Man United to beat Leicester away, and that is it. Very simple. Whoever gets the most predictions correct will win that £50 Amazon voucher. If there's a tie where more than one person has the same number of predictions correct, I will do a random draw on the next deadline stream. Completely free to play. Use the link in the description below or scan that QR code on screen. So let's get into some of your questions. I have covered some of this stuff in previous videos this week, so I'll try and keep it quick. Who's the best Nottingham Forest defender? My overall favourite pick is probably Milenkovic at 4.8 million. Absolutely nailed on. Decent threat from set pieces as well. Nico Williams is 0.4 million cheaper at 4.4 million and has started every single game since Game Week 15. So we can consider him pretty much nailed on as well. Although I wouldn't be as confident that he'll start all of the rest of the games as I would be with Milenkovic, so that's why you pay a little bit more. The only fixture that might be a slight doubt, after speaking to Mark Southerns, who's on like FPL Black Box, FPL Show and stuff like that, is Game Week 30 against Man United at home. Because just before that, you've got an FA Cup match. Presumably Forest will put out their first choice team, which includes Nico Williams. And Moreno can't play against Villa because he's on loan. So Moreno starting against Man United at home could happen. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but if Nico Williams is going to miss any of these matches, it's probably that one. Outside of that, given what we've seen since Game Week 15, we have to expect him to continue to start, and 4.4 million is a decent price. Aina's the most popular and has scored the most points, but over 5 million, I just don't think it's worth it. If you're on free hit and you want to go for him, fair enough. In every other situation, I just get Milenkovic for a cheaper price. So is it worth selling Ouattara for a -4 to a similarly priced player? I think generally the answer is yes, especially if you're looking to wildcard in game week 31, because Bournemouth have got Brentford at home this week, Ipswich at home in 30, which looks great, but Ouattara might not start either of those games. And in the FA Cup match, I think Kirkes is suspended, so Ouattara might even play left back. And if he starts that game, there's going to be no guarantee that he also starts Ipswich as well. So I think for 2 game weeks, for a -4, for a player you can't guarantee will start, it's worth spending those points and hoping that the player you bring in will pay them back, especially if it's for someone like Kluivert or Semenyo, who's got those 2 really good fixtures. If you're someone that's potentially going to wildcard in game week 30, it's a little bit trickier because the hit has to pay back straight away. I'd probably lean more towards still selling him for that hit, but you don't have to. You could just rely on him coming off the bench at a minimum, 1 pointer. The -4 would take you to 5. Will that player definitely outscore 5 points this week? Not a guarantee. There's no real right or wrong here. If someone said, no, I'm just going to keep him, I would think that's fine. But in most cases, I think I would probably sell him for that -4, especially if you're trying to wildcard in 31. So is activating the wildcard in game week 30 the best strategy? By then, will all the blank and double game weeks be clear? So just on that last part, the answer is no. It's not a guarantee that we will know the blank and double game week schedule by the game week 30 deadline. Basically, the FA Cup games are being played on the weekend. The game week 30 deadline is on Tuesday. So that information would have to come out pretty quickly. If we don't have the blank and double game week schedule by 30, the hope is that we will have it by game week 31. So if you want to know exactly what game week 33 and 34 are going to look like from a double and blank perspective, you should be trying to put off the wildcard until game week 31. The information we will have by game week 30 is what's happened in the FA Cup matches. So although it might not be laid out for us, we can make a pretty good educated guess of what the future schedule of the season might look like. So in some ways, if you can get through game week 29 and wait for that FA Cup result information, wildcarding in game week 30 might be better for your team. But I've got to say it, and I know it's so cliche, it's really going to depend on your team. All I can say is, if you can put the wildcard off till 30 or preferably 31 without too much damage to your team, that is exactly what you should do. I would really try and put people off wildcarding in 29 unless their team is an absolute mess, because you are going in blind in terms of the fixtures, but also you're doing it ahead of an international break and FA Cup matches. Lots can go wrong. The fixture could screw you over. You could get injury suspensions. Like, it is... Wildcard 29 is scary. That's all I can say. So wildcard 30 is not necessarily the best strategy. It depends on your team. But for a lot of people, if you can get through 29 and at least get those FA Cup results before you wildcard, that would be pretty handy. What are your thoughts on selling Isak and Salah only to buy them back on wildcard 31? I'd lose 0.8 million in team value, but have a decent team for game weeks 29 and 30. So generally, I think it's okay to think about this, despite the fact that many people absolutely hate it, because as important as team value is, and it can be super handy, especially around wildcards and free hits and stuff like that, points are also important. So if you think you can get a lot of points by selling these 2 players, it might be worth the team value here. Also, Isak is probably going to drop in price tonight. Salah will probably have a price drop over the coming days as well. So that 0.8 might all of a sudden be 0.6. The only thing to say about that is people might start buying Isak and Salah back in game week 30. Their prices might go up before you look to wildcard. So in theory, it can work. All I can say is go and put together what you think a wildcard 31 draft might look like and see how much team value you've got left over. Because if it includes Salah and Isak and you're already struggling for cash with all the other players you want to put in, I would be maybe a little bit more against losing that much team value, because for most people, you will want Salah back. You're not going to want to go without him for too long. From looking at wildcard 29 drafts, money is not that much of an issue as it stands, but things can change. Like in my wildcard 29 draft, I've got Semenyo, Kluivert, and Evan Nilsson. They look great as long as they keep playing. But if they don't, I've got to go and find attackers for kind of 6 million or less to replace them, and there might not be that many options. I might need even more money. One player that no one is really considering right now is Saka. Like, I've got Palmer in my squad for wildcard 29, and I keep thinking if something goes wrong, I can just sell Palmer. But what if I also want to get Isak? and Haaland and Salah, all of a sudden team value becomes extremely important. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you it doesn't matter, because it can. But as things look right now, I think you can probably get away with it as long as you're guaranteeing yourself, on paper at least, that your team is that much better. But if you can avoid, it's a bit like Wildcard 29. If you can avoid doing it, I absolutely would. Same with Salah and Isak. If you can hold the team value, I would do it. But I think for a lot of people, it probably does make sense to sell at least one if it lets you put out a much better team. So who is the best defender for a 2-week punt before wildcarding in game week 31? A Forest defender, Vardio, Ain't Nouri, or someone else? I think if money is no object, I would just get Vardio. I know the Man City defence hasn't been as good this season, and Brighton at home is not an easy fixture. But overall, game weeks 29 and 30, you've got 2 home games against Brighton and Leicester. That looks pretty good. Out of all of the defenders in the league, Vardio is right up there in terms of goal threat, and his ownership right now is really low. I know people will be talking about putting him on free hit, wildcards, transferring him in. His ownership is going to go up, but not by as much as I think people are talking about him. So he is probably where I would go. I think with Nottingham Forest, you could go and get like a Nico Williams or a Milenkovic. Ipswich away is good, but it is an away game. And then in game week 30, it's Man United at home. And I know that Forest have defended really well, and Man United haven't been attacking that great, to be fair, the whole season. But on paper, as a combination, I'd rather have Vardio for Brighton and Leicester at home than a Forest defender for Ipswich away and Man United at home. And Ain't Nouri is good. Southampton away and West Ham at home, pretty decent. I'm just not sure how much I trust the Wolves defence. Like, I can sit here and say the Man City defence hasn't been as good, but it's still better than Wolves. Is Ain't Nouri that much more attacking? I'm not so sure he is. So I think out of those 3 options, I go Vardio. And I'm not really sure there's too many other picks that are better for 2 weeks. If you think about which players have got fixtures this week, like Everton, West Ham at home is good, but then it's Liverpool away in game week 30. No one's going Ipswich. No one's probably going to go Brighton with Man City away. Southampton, no chance. Bournemouth, not bad, to be fair, like a Kirkes, Brentford at home and Ipswich at home. I think he competes quite nicely with Vardio. I'd still go Vardio, I think. Just that threat from set pieces. Like, he's not necessarily getting as forward from open play, but I still think I prefer him to Kirkes. But that is a close call. And also, you could argue that Arsenal defender is a close call as well. Chelsea at home, Fulham at home. Their defence is great. So for me, it would probably be Kirkes or Vardio, and I'd probably just stick with Vardio. So if it's leaked that Marmoush starts, would you consider bringing him in? That really depends on what strategy you're on, because if you're looking for a 2-week punt before wildcard 31, you've got no guarantee that he'll start in game week 30. And obviously that is the better fixture of the two against Leicester at home. So even if you get word that he starts in 29, will he definitely start in 30? You could maybe argue, if that happens, that you've got the guaranteed start in the harder fixture. And even if he doesn't start Leicester, he will come off the bench and could maybe get you something. But I don't think he's so good that you need to risk that. So wildcard 31, I'd probably ignore him. If I was on free hit, I'd be super tempted as a punt over like a Chris Wood or an Evan Nielsen just for 1 week only. Not saying that Marmoush is better than those two necessarily, but if you're looking to go different, he's worth considering. And if you're pretty sure you're going to wildcard in 30 and you want to go for a slightly differential player for 29 before you hit that button, then I like him as well. But anyone looking for like a long-term strategy, or 29 and 30, or if you're wildcarding in 29, I would completely avoid him. So how many hits is too many hits? I think the real question should be, how many hits does your team need? And however many it needs, that is what I would take to get to 11 players. I've said that all week. I think there's enough good players and fixtures this week in 29 to warrant taking hits to get up to 11 playing players, especially if you're looking to wildcard in 31. Because a lot of the players that are good for this week are also good for game week 30. So if you don't want to use a chip, I would take whatever's needed. -8, -12, absolutely fine. I would say, though, if you're starting to look at -12s, -16s, you've got to consider the choice of potentially wildcarding instead. I know the fixture information is really important, but -12 is a lot of points. So you could wildcard this week, and if you do get screwed over by the fixtures, maybe take an extra -4 in a couple of weeks later on. That's also fine to do. So I would take a -12 if I didn't want to use a chip this week or if I didn't have one. But at that point, if you've got the wild card in hand, I'll be tempted to think about it. Free hit I would be wary of because you'll get the same team back in game week 30. And if you've got issues this week that's maybe requiring a -8 or a -12, you might still have those issues in game week 30. So free hit I'd be a little bit less sure of. So I put out a free hit video on Sunday. I thought I'd go through some updated thoughts on how I might set the team up if I was playing the chip this week. In goal, I've still got Jordan Pickford against West Ham at home. Decent fixture. When you look at the clean sheet odds on Rob T's numbers on Twitter, Everton really high up. And I know he's quite highly owned by non-free hitters, but I think he stacks up well against a Sales pick, for example. So if you want to go for a Forest goalkeeper, you should absolutely do that. But I quite like Jordan Pickford this week. Gabriel and Vardy are still in. The only defender I've changed is Mazraoui in for Aït-Nouri. I think with Dorgu suspended, Mazraoui will play right wing back. I wouldn't necessarily trust him long term, but for 1 week only against Leicester, who have been quite goal shy, I quite like that pick. I think basically my thinking is Mazraoui and Aït-Nouri, I don't think there's too much difference between them this week, but Aït-Nouri is going to be more popular. So I think on a free hit, I'm looking for that slight differential where I can. And that's why I've got Man United defence. Wouldn't trust them long term. If you want to go Forest defender instead, you absolutely should, or even Aït-Nouri. But I've gone for Mazraoui. Dalot is also a pretty good pick as well. Fernandes, Kluivert and Semenyo in midfield pretty much would be locked in for me. The one change I've made is Mbeumo out and Foden in. I think I could only stick with that if we get a leak that Foden starts. I would predict him to start, but I wouldn't be 100% confident about it because it's a Man City player. I'm just looking for that differential. Mbeumo's a solid pick. If you've got him in your squad and you're happy with that, do not question it. He's really good, but he's very highly owned and it's Bournemouth away. It's not an easy fixture. And I think people are underestimating Man City a little bit. They're not as good as they once were under Pep, but they're still pretty decent. And Foden against Brighton at home, is a huge differential. Up front, Haaland and Chris Wood. I don't think many people can argue about those two picks. And then I've still got Beto in there. You could go for Evan Nielsen instead, triple up on Bournemouth against Brentford at home. Don't mind that. But Evan Nielsen could get subbed early. He's not on penalties. Beto is on penalties, and he usually plays 90 minutes with the amount of injuries that Everton have got with their forwards. So I actually quite like Beto. But I think for 1 week only, he stands up really well against like an Evan Nielsen or a Strand Larsen or someone like that. If we got a leak that Marmoush was starting, I really like that pick as well. I wouldn't go for Vissa over Beto, I don't think, even though Vissa's a decent pick as well. There's not a huge amount of other forwards that I haven't already chosen. Like Raul Jimenez against Spurs at home, look, you've got a bench on a free hit, but Raul Jimenez is not guaranteed to start. He probably will, but it ain't a guarantee, and he often gets subbed early. So I think I'd rather go someone like Beto. Maybe Højlund. No, not Højlund. Højlund actually I thought looked all right last night, but he's still just, like, I'm saying Leicester are goal shy, so is Højlund. Like, that is a mega punt. Don't completely hate it, but don't come back to me when it doesn't work out. So that's why I've still got Beto in. But if you wanted to go Evan Nielsen, Marmoush, something like that, that definitely works too. So just quickly on my team, if you've watched the other videos this week, you'll know that I'm in a little bit of trouble for game week 29 in terms of how my team is set up. So Pickford in goal, back four, Gabriel, Mykolenko, Anderson and Greaves. The midfield is Palmer, Mbeumo, Nwaneri and Ouattara, and then Salah who blanks. Then up front, Cunha suspended, Isak blanks, and so does Watkins. Trent also doesn't have a fixture and he's probably injured for a few weeks as well. There's lots of different ways that I could play this. And honestly, I'm probably writing off the rest of Friday afternoon. I'm sure I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about my team. But my current two favourite options are to either take a -8 and delay the wild card, which would basically be Trent, Isak, Cunha and Watkins out. Milenkovic in, so Nottingham Forest defence. Potentially Mazraoui in if I decide I'm definitely going to wildcard in 30. And then Chris Wood, Evan Nielsen and Haaland in. To be honest, Milenkovic has got Man United at home in game week 30 anyway. So I think I'd probably be looking to wildcard in 30 if I take the -8. Is that -8 worth it just to delay the wildcard? I'm still not convinced it is. I think in some ways I'm probably in a little bit of denial where I know I should wildcard 29, but I'm too scared to hit the button because I know it could be an absolute disaster. And when everyone else is doing something different, it doesn't mean you have to follow the crowd, but maybe they're doing that for a reason. And they are, right? They want the FA Cup results. They want the double game week schedule. There is potentially a lot of points on offer once you've got that info, if you get it right. So it is quite scary going against the grain, especially with an international break and FA Cup afterwards. But this -8 I think looks okay. If I went through with this, I'd maybe even tempt myself into a -12 and just sell Ouattara as well and just get a different midfielder in. But when I've got Anderson and Greaves on the bench, I'm not sure I should do that. I think at the very least I should just probably play Anderson instead of Ouattara if I'm that worried about him. So that's a potential -8. I really don't think my team can get through to wildcard 31. I think if I don't wildcard this week, I've almost certainly got to do it in 30. So Max Rary might tempt me as another bit of a differential. Or I wildcard, and at the moment, this is probably my favourite wildcard draft. Absolutely nothing is locked in or set in stone because there's so many different ways this can be played. But basically, Raya and Gabriel double up on Arsenal defence. I've kind of missed that. I could even go triple up, by the way. Raya, Gabriel, Saliba is not out of consideration completely because Arsenal are quite important for this strategy. Vardiol is my other expensive defender. Nico Williams plays this week. He's good for bench boost 32. And then I've got Livramento and Davern on the bench. Midfield is Palmer, Fernandes, Kluivert and Semenyo, with Sarr on the bench ready for Southampton away in game week 30, the double for Palace in game week 32. Then up front it's Chris Wood, Haaland and Evan Nielsen. Haaland will definitely be my captain if I bring him in. And to be honest with you, because I know pretty much from what everyone is saying, Chris Wood is going to be the most heavily captain player in FPL this week, it just makes me want Haaland even more to go against him. Not because I think Chris Wood is a bad option, because I'm probably going to bring him in for hits or wildcard him in, but just because I want to go for that differential captain. So Haaland will almost certainly be my captain this week. The idea would be that depending on how the fixtures go and when I end up deciding to free hit, the Fernandes and Chris Wood would become Eze and Isak. So 2 free transfers which I would have from game week 30. I'd then have my 6 double game week players. I can make those transfers in 30 or 31. It doesn't really matter. And if I end up free hitting in 33, I might sell Haaland to Isak and then do Fernandes to Salah and get him back. And then later on do one of Kluivert or Semenyo to Eze to get my 6th Palace and Newcastle player. So this draft has some flexibility in it. It's very likely that Man City will double. So Haaland and Vardiol are there. If Crystal Palace win and they double, so will Arsenal. So I have 3 Palace players from 32 plus 2 Arsenal players in Raya and Gabriel. In that case, I would have 7 double game weekers and I could probably just free hit 34 instead and just bring a few more doublers in for 33 at the time. There is obviously massive risk with this strategy. International break injuries, FA Cup injuries, the fixtures don't go quite how you wanted to. By the time you get to 33, yeah, it's great having 7 doublers and just bring in another 3 or 4, but you might have the wrong doublers. Players might pick up injuries. Like, it's just not, it's not an ideal strategy, but I really think my team is as close as you're going to get to having to wildcard 29. I've said this already this week, and I think I've said it already in this video. If you can if you can avoid wildcard 29, I absolutely would, because it could be a mess. Even wildcard 30 will be better with those FA Cup results. But at the moment, this is my favourite draft. Ideally, I would start with Isak because I know 100% I want him back if he's fit and available. But I quite like having Fernandes and Wood for game week 29 because obviously this week has to be considered as well. And there's flexibility in terms of how I get Isak in. I either sell Chris Wood or I sell Haaland depending on how the fixtures fall. And obviously if Bournemouth end up beating Man City, then I've got 3 Bournemouth players ready who have got a double as well. And if they double, so will Man United. So that will be Bruno. And if it gets to the point where I need to keep Haaland, but I also need to get Isak, and I don't want to sell Bruno because he's got a double in 33, at that point I could sell Cole Palmer instead. That's kind of my cash cow. The other thing I'm thinking about, honestly, I can't even explain the amount of hours I've spent thinking about wildcard 29, and I might not even hit the button yet, is Saka could be an option soon after the international break, and he's 10.2 million. Palmer is 10.9. So that's another 0.7 million saving. Let's say Crystal Palace win in game week 34. Sorry, win in the FA Cup, so they blank in 34 and double in 33. So would Arsenal then. I've only got 2 Arsenal players in my wildcard draft. I could even do Palmer to Saka. So I think half of my thinking is, who am I potentially going to get locked out of that people who wildcard later will go for? Mateta, definitely one. I might not be able to get him. Munoz has barely been in my drafts at all. And Saka could be a massive differential. And I'd love to have him. Because if Arsenal double in 33, it'll be Ipswich away and Palace at home. That's pretty good. Munoz, he might still make it in. As I've said before, it's much easier to manage the next few weeks without him. And just bring in like Eze instead. And I've got Henderson ready for the double. I would really hate not to have Munoz for 30 against Southampton away, but outside of that, I think I can possibly get away with it. The defensive like clean sheet perspective. Sorry, the potential clean sheets for Crystal Palace in the double are not great anyway. It's like Newcastle away and Man City away. Anyway, I've rambled on. I don't really know what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend the next few hours thinking about it. It's either a -8. I'm probably not going to take the -4s, or it's a wild card, which would save me 8 points, and the team will probably look a bit better as well. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to join the Let's Talk FPL League over on Steeper, completely free, link in the description below. Otherwise, I'll catch you tomorrow for the slightly later deadline of 11:30 AM UK time. The deadline stream will start at 11:30 UK time. The deadline is 1:30 in the afternoon UK time. The first matches start at 3 PM. Anyway, I've completely lost it. Too much thinking about wildcard. See you later.